A week after being announced, Paulo Costa has pulled out of his fight against Bruno Ferreira at UFC 326. And you might say this isn't a big deal, things happen, fighters pull out all the time. Well, this marks Costa's 9th time pulling out of a fight. So it's not crazy to say that he might be the problem. Let's briefly look over every single time Costa has pulled out in the UFC alone, shall we? April 2018, Costa pulled out of his fight against Uriah Hall due to injury. Many people say that Israel Adesanya took Costa's soul when he knocked him out, and then he started fighting worse and pulling out after that fight, but this pullout was actually before the Izzy fight. Then in 2021, he pulled out against Robert Whittaker because he had the flu. Then again in 2021, he pulled out against Jared Cannonier and cited contract disputes as the problem. Costa claimed that he wasn't getting paid enough and never even signed the contract to fight Cannonier despite the UFC promoting it. If you recall one of my previous videos, the UFC can cut you for doing something like that, but somehow Costa didn't. Then again in 2021, Costa actually showed up to fight Marvin Vettori, but missed weight by 20 pounds. That's regarded as one of the biggest weight misses in UFC history. He claims he injured his arm 3 weeks before the fight, so he couldn't train or cut weight, and still showed up to fight, which if true is commendable, but still, missing weight by 20 pounds means you didn't even try. So Costa came in 20 pounds overweight, forcing Marvin to accept the fight at 205 instead of 185, and Marvin still won the fight. But let's move on. In 2022, Costa was scheduled to fight Luke Rockhold, but for some reason, Costa delayed the fight to happen later in the year despite it already being promoted for an earlier date. When the fight finally happened, Costa ended up winning that fight and put on a pretty good performance. You see, what's frustrating about Costa is that when he actually does show up, his fights are almost always entertaining and he's a very talented fighter, but he just for some reason can't show up to fight. Costa was scheduled to fight Robert Whittaker again for UFC 284, and the same situation that went down with Cannonier happened again. The UFC is promoting the fight. Costa claimed he never signed the contract and said he wasn't going to sign it because he wasn't getting paid enough, so the fight was scrapped again. After that, he was scheduled to fight Ikram Alexskarov, but the fight was scrapped so Paulo can fight a bigger name in Khamzat Chimaev, the current champion. Paulo got an infection and pulled out of the Khamzat fight, causing Kamaru Usman to step in on short notice, who put on a really fun fight. Fast forward to June 2025, Costa was scheduled to fight Roman Kopylov but got sick and pulled out. The fight was scheduled for a month later, and Costa actually showed up and beat Roman Kopylov in a pretty fun fight. Again, Costa's career is so frustrating because, like I said, he's actually really talented. He's not a bad fighter by any means, and the reason the UFC has kept him around and given him special treatment is because he's so marketable, good on the mic, and entertaining. In my previous video, I talked about how Rinat Fakhretdinov, an undefeated fighter in the UFC, got cut after coming off a knockout victory, causing a lot of fans to be outraged. Islam Makhachev said that Rinat got cut because he just isn't marketable, doesn't know English, and all he does is win fights, and that's not enough these days. And still, the UFC has cut people for much less. They cut Brian Battle for missing weight 2 times in a row. They cut Muhammad Mokaev because the matchmakers didn't like him. They cut Francis Ngannou because he was asking for more money, but for some reason Costa is still stuck around. Everyone knows the UFC is full of double standards, but this thing with Costa is pretty crazy. Now, I know fighters get injured all the time, and that's out of their control. I myself have been injured multiple times, and some people are just less lucky than others and get hurt more often. But 9 pullouts in the UFC alone leads you to believe that some of those might have been preventable. There are 2 types of fighters in the UFC. Fighters that show up and fight, even if they're sick, if they're injured, they don't care. They'll show up and fight, kind of like Merab Dvalishvili. Everyone's heard those stories. Oh, I went into this fight with a broken leg, broken hand, I had norovirus, still showed up. But other fighters want the absolute perfect scenario to fight. They want the best opponent in the best type of matchmaking, in the best arena, and they want to be completely healthy or else they're gonna pull out, which is understandable. You have to protect your UFC record. If you lose a bunch of fights in a row, you're gonna get cut. But Costa is just taking it to the extreme, in my opinion. Costa still doesn't have as many canceled fights as Manel Kape, though. He's the true pullout merchant. Not all of Manel's canceled fights are his fault, but pretty much most of them are. In Costa's case, all of them are his fault. Oh, and I asked 2 accounts who reported the news of Costa's most recent pullout, and they both said they don't know the reason for the pullout. And that was a day or 2 ago, so we don't even know if the reason is valid or not. But what do you think? Are you still riding with Costa, or is he over the hill? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.